continuing with inequalities, how do you solve? So this is going to be a good review of solving equations. There's really only one difference in an inequality and an equation when it comes to solving. I'm going to write it here on the side, so make sure you know this. Whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, you must flip the inequality symbol. So it's the lone difference between an equation and an inequality. It's the only difference that we're going to have. So we're going to use that here to start solving. So hopefully you've written that down. I'm going to come over here and get rid of that. So let's take problem 1. We see here we have multiple choice, but I'm going to take the problem and I'm going to translate it down here at the bottom so I can work it out. So 12 minus x is greater than negative 4. So if I were to think of this as an equation, the first thing I would do is get rid of the 12 by subtracting, since that's a positive 12. Now we cancel. That would leave negative x. I keep my inequality symbol, and that's negative 16. Now, what I have to remember, even though it's not written, I have to remember that's like a negative 1 in front of that x. So how do I get rid of that negative 1? Well, I have to divide. Now I'm referring to the rule. Anytime I multiply or divide by negative, then I've got to flip my inequality symbol. So those are going to cancel. It's going to leave x, but now my symbol is going to flip and becomes x is less than 16, which would be choice A. Now, here's another way to think about possibly solving this. Look at your answer choices here and pick values that are on the graphed number line. For example, I could take the number 14, plug 14 into this problem, and see if it makes sense. If I took a number, for example, like 18 and plugged it in, it would not work. So that's another way to help kind of invoke a testing strategy for a multiple choice. Doesn't always work, but it's a good strategy to use. Okay, problem number 2. So here we have fractions. No big deal though, we're going to use the calculator. So again, I'm going to write it over here on the side. So I have 1 3/11 plus a is greater than 496 over 165. So all I do here is, to get rid of that 1 3/11, is I subtract. So when I do that, I'm going to get a is greater than, I don't flip my inequality symbol here because I did not multiply or divide by negative, I merely subtracted, and that's okay. So when I do this, okay, I'm going to do some review of fractions here, even though you might have a calculator to help you. Remember, we've got to get a common denominator. So the first thing I'm going to do is change my mixed number. So I'll multiply, add. So that would be 11. 11 plus 3 is 14, so that'd be a negative 14 over 11. So I have 496 over 165 minus 14 over 11. So get a common denominator. I have to multiply this by 15, multiply that by 15. So now that becomes 496 over 165 minus, so now the bottom here is 165. So if I do that, let's see, 10, that'd be 140. 5 times that would be 70. So 140 and 70 would be 210. I subtract that, and that's going to give me 286 over 165. Now, if I go up here and look, I don't see any of those. But one thing that I can look at, even before I keep simplifying, which if I do simplify is going to give me 26 over 15. But what I did know at the very beginning here was A is greater than. So I knew it's got to be A is greater than something. We'll look at my answer choices. That one and that one don't work. So it eliminates it down to 2. The other thing that's eliminated, this one is eliminated because 2 reasons. One, the graph has a closed circle and it should be open because it doesn't have equal sign, and it's shaded to the left and it should be going to the right. Therefore, F would be the answer by default. So even without a calculator, you can, again, figure out testing strategies and find ways to find your answer without necessarily working it out completely sometimes. Alright, so we're going to keep going here. We're going to go a little bit faster. So the next one, I have n over 1.3 is less than 13 point blah blah blah. I'm not going to write all that. How do I get rid of the 1.3? I multiply. So those cancel. Since I multiplied by a positive 1.3, it doesn't change my symbol, so it becomes n is less than. Okay, so now let's use our testing strategy. N is less than. That one's out. That says n is greater than. Next thing, if I take a number like 13 and multiply it by something bigger than 1, then it's got to end up with a number value greater than 13. Well, that eliminates this one, and it would eliminate this one. So if you multiply that out, it doesn't come out exactly 17, but it comes out close to that, close enough that they rounded it. So our answer choice would be D here. N is less than 17. So hopefully testing strategies are evolving here. You're starting to figure these out a little bit. Okay, now what about these where they're not multiple choice, where we actually have to solve them? Okay, so these are a little more straightforward. So the first one, n over 14 is less than or equal to negative 3. How do I get rid of the 14? I multiply. So let's cancel. Now, that leaves n. Now, do I switch my inequality symbol? And the answer would be no, because I did not multiply by a negative number. This is positive 14. It doesn't matter about this one. It's what you multiply or divide by. Since that's a positive number, it keeps my inequality symbol the same direction. I multiply that out and I get negative 42. So I go to negative 42. I put a closed circle. Since my inequality symbol points to the left, since my variable's on the left, then I shade to the left, and then I put an arrow on the end. Okay, problem 5. First thing I'm going to do, again, I always like my variable on the left-hand side. So the first thing I'm going to do is just rewrite the whole problem. So I'm going to put my variable on the left, put the number on the right, or my fraction. Then remember, my inequality symbol here, that alligator mouth, is eating the fraction, or Pac-Man's eating the fraction, however you think of it. So it has to be that way here. Now I can solve. I'm dividing by 20, so how do I get rid of it? I multiply. Cancel. Now, right here, those cancel as well. Now, do I switch my inequality symbol? And the answer is no, because I multiply by a positive 20. So since the 20's canceled, that leaves negative 11. I go to negative 11, which would be right here, put a closed circle. Since my variable is on the left, which is what I did at the very beginning, My arrow's pointing to the left, so I shade to the left. Put an arrow. Alright, one more. So again, my variable is on the right here, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to rewrite this statement and put my variable on the left. The alligator mouth is eating the -20, so it has to here. How do I get rid of the -10? Well, that's multiply, so the opposite would be divide. Since I am dividing by a negative number, then right here my inequality symbol is going to have to switch, flip it. Those cancel, that leaves a. -20 divided by -10 is 2. Since my variable's on the left here, my arrow's pointing to the right, I know it's going to go to the right. I go to 2, I put an open circle since it's not equal, shade to the right, and put an arrow on the end. So hopefully that gives you a quick review of solving one-step inequalities as well as a review of just solving equations in general. Don't forget the one difference: when you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip that inequality symbol.